Welcome to the coffee house. Hello everyone, and welcome to the coffee house. Today is the first video we are producing, so if you're taking a chance here, welcome. I'm glad to have you. Today's discussion is going to be about a property that I love, one that is full of a star-studded cast but fails to execute on any of their talents, at least to me. It's something that has had the most potential to be something great, but ultimately buckled under the executive reactions and poor planning. And that property is the DCEU. As it stands now in 2025, the DCEU is officially over, at least its original Zack Snyder version of it. And don't worry, we'll get there. However, the ramifications and groundwork that it has plotted is still going to be used going forward, having given us some great concepts and ideas, but also some really low moments with our beloved heroes. To discuss this video today, I'm going to be pairing it with my favorite coffee, Cafe Bustelo. Since this is my first outing, I wanted to use something comfortable, but also something that is going to keep me awake throughout this journey. For those of you that don't know, Cafe Bustelo is what's known as Cuban coffee, created by a man named Gregorio Bustelo during the 1920s in New York City. This blend is known for its espresso usage and dark roasted taste. However, today we're going to be stepping away from the espresso and using it in a coffee pot instead. And I know, this is against type, especially for this coffee. However, the rich aroma and smooth yet bold taste it sports is something that shouldn't be missed on, in addition to being something that's going to keep me awake. So, grab yourself a cup, pull up a chair, and let's discuss the DCEU. To begin discussing this video, I want to make a few things clear. First off, I love the DC universe. The world's most popular characters come from this property, in addition to it having a very rich library of stories. Secondly, please expect spoilers for all of these movies. If you get mad at spoilers, then I don't know what to tell you. Why are you here? Throughout the video, I'm occasionally going to address what I like to call points of contention. These are going to be moments that I feel really decided the fate of the DCEU as it continued to grow, while subsequently deciding its fate during its perpetual downfall. The last thing is a term called the Snyderverse. This is in reference to the director, Zack Snyder, who essentially paved the way for the entire run of DCEU movies, and is a term that we're going to be utilizing a lot. I know many of you already know that, however, if you don't, now you do. To begin, though, we have to go all the way back to more than 10 years ago, it's such a long time ago, to a little year known as 2013, and move on to discuss what I like to call the Superman problem. Before the DCEU began, its counterpart Marvel was already well into production on several films. You had its first big phase wrapping up, a third Iron Man movie that just came out, and what is arguably the start of its killer run with Winter Soldier right on the horizon. Now, does this have anything to do with DC? Well, no. However, the climate for superhero movies was richer than ever at this point, and DC had nothing but an open field in front of them. So enter Man of Steel. Man of Steel is arguably the best property that you could have begun this franchise with, outside the likes of Batman. You had the most popular superhero in Superman, with one of today's most beloved actors portraying him, and Henry Cavill. We love some Henry Cavill. So then that begs the question, what's wrong with it? Well, if you're part of one camp, then nothing. But the other side of that fence would often disagree, and therein lies a divisiveness in what the true issue actually is. Like many Superman stories, we get Clark discovering who he is as a person, man, and human being of this world, struggling to figure out where he fits into all this while also having godlike powers. In my opinion, it's a very cool idea to take a look at how people of this planet react to someone who is a savior, but not one that necessarily wants to be worshipped, just someone wanting to do the right thing. Additionally, you also have several good ideas of how the world's government reacts to a being like this. You see, Man of Steel is a very different Superman movie, one that is much darker and grittier than most people expected. Most of the time, Superman's world is one of color and light, but this one has a very different feel. In addition to that, you have two moments that sparked a lot of discussion and division for people: the killing of Zod and the destruction of Metropolis. Personally speaking, I'm a fan of these moments. I know, shocking. But the idea of having a Superman who doesn't know how to do the hero thing yet while also resisting his native people and protecting Earth is a cool idea to me. It really brings that human aspect together. Additionally, I do think it's kind of cool to have the destruction of Metropolis being your catalyst event for all the heroes going forward, but more on that later. It's the last part, though, that really rubbed some people the wrong way and created such divisiveness between people, and that is the killing of Zod. People do not like this. To some, Batman is a boy wonder, a boy scout, someone who finds a different way to solve his issues and does not kill. And although that may be true, it's not what happened with the death of Zod. To many, this was a crime of the highest order, but to some, like myself, this was interesting. Taking a hero and forcing him into a situation like this could be good for growth, later forcing him into his no-kill perspective or creating strife between him and his future hero counterparts. It also still leads into the whole can we trust him, can we not dynamic when it comes to humanity. However, therein lies the problem. Yet again, despite me liking this idea and finding it interesting, it still does not solidify him as someone of hope and freedom, the best of us. It still leaves the humans in the film, with an idea of unsureness, a feeling of can we trust him or can we not? And not only is this somewhat of a good idea, if it was going to be used going forward, but what it did was create this divisiveness amongst fans that I have been referencing. So yes, we start off our universe with a strong hero and strong ideas, but we left our audience divided on where Superman was and the events that we just witnessed. Now, I will say, I personally think Man of Steel is not a bad film. The discussion of bad films may be coming sooner rather than later. However, for now we're moving forward in the right direction. And nothing could possibly go wrong, right? This movie sucks. I'm sorry if you like it. Before we go forward, consider this entire film a point of contention in itself, and I'll discuss as to why. After following Man of Steel, DCU fans would have had to wait a whole 3 years before getting anything else. No series, no plan, just silence. Meanwhile, Marvel is killing it by going on the hottest run of all time. However, that was until we got 2016's Batman vs. Superman. Believe me, the hype was real. Not only did this film sport our two biggest names in the superhero genre, we were also getting our intro to Wonder Woman and our official kickoff to the DCEU. And how did we start off on a strong note? We fucking kill Superman. Yeah. Not only is this movie so off in terms of pacing and plot, but things just sort of happen. I really want to like this. Everything Batman works for me, except the guns. So, I guess let's start there. Now, if I'm being honest, I'm being a hypocrite when talking about Batman and the use of guns. If I kind of like the idea of Superman killing, then I have to be okay with the gun Batman. Hello, Thomas Wayne. However, much like Superman, I could have seen that point explored more as a means of no killing between the two, both coming to some sort of agreement as heroes are growing to be better people together. I'm not saying it's perfect, but it's something. Now, speaking of something, why are the moms the thing that make us finally see eye to eye and not, a sharing of ideals or a common ground between the two? Instead, we get the name Martha and expect it all to be okay.
Why did you say that name?
Not answering any of the questions they each may have had, like, where did you come from? Why are you on Earth? Or what is your intention? It feels very lazy, and a small trope that was put in that eventually got done to death. The internet is not very forgiving. Although, to break from that, I will say that the Batman warehouse fight scene was still one of, if not the best Batman fight scene we have ever gotten on screen. I still go back to this day and harbor the feeling that this is how Batman is supposed to fight. His punches hurt, the impact is felt, and Batman feels like this unstoppable force that just plows through criminals. So, Batman. Lastly, I want to talk about the death of the Superman storyline and the Dark Knight Returns storyline. I'm talking about the comic book and not the last Christian Bale movie, just to specify. I feel that the decision to utilize these as jumping off points is still the biggest question mark on this franchise today. It's the one thing that always made me scratch my head and ponder why it was here in the first place. For those of you that don't know, both the death of Superman and the Dark Knight Returns are very prominent arcs in the comic books. Each of them serve to change the dynamics of both of these heroes or DC Comics as a whole, especially Superman's. So it's odd to me as to why you start with two story arcs that are designed to end stories and not create them. So let's start with The Dark Knight. This story arc is centered around an older Bruce Wayne, one that is jaded to crime, more cruel, and sees a broken Bruce Wayne being less respectful than who he used to be. We do see Superman feature in this story, transpiring in a fight that plays out very similarly to that of the movie, without the names of our moms. However, that fight is more of a changing of ideals and power rather than trading what your mom's first name is. Furthermore, the story involves a Batman at the end of his career, being someone older and coming into the twilight of his life as Batman. And furthermore, this Batman is one who has been out of the game, an urban legend, returning to Gotham in the midst of a rampant crime wave to once again don the cape. Now, I'm not saying that this idea can't work, but I feel that if this story were to come out at the very tail end of these movies, then it would have been better served, having explored both Batman and Superman's perspectives, dynamics, friendship, and hero ideologies, but ending with each of them, and thus bringing the greater story of the whole film franchise to full circle. Additionally, it would have given us, the audience, time to grow with this Batman, feeling every inch of the pain that he felt, the cruelty that he endured, the losses, the triumphs, all culminating in a final story arc as both of our last goodbyes to these heroes. However, what we got instead was a sad Ben Affleck interview paired with the small little glimmers of hope of what his Batman could have been. But hey, that's a video for another day. On the flip side of this coin, we have the death of Superman. And oh boy, do I have opinions. Like, first off, how are you going to introduce the most important character to then subsequently kill him off in the next film? If the first part of this video tells you anything, it's that we barely got to know him. Additionally, we never see him grow, never become the hero or spend time looking at his flaws. The only thing we get is a beatdown between him and Batman, and now he's dead. Furthermore, the idea of shelving your main character does such a huge disservice to your franchise. Not only is the audience even farther removed from Superman after the 3-year gap, but now we don't even get to see him interact with the other heroes, play prominent parts in storylines, or form any sort of relationship with him as a hero. Bottom line, we don't care. Additionally, this also took the actor Henry Cavill away from our screens, and that is a cardinal sin that can never be forgiven. All of this mixed together, though, makes his death just feel empty. A big nothing burger of a situation that only left us scratching our heads. This event should have been huge, a moment where each of us stood still, placing our jaws on the floor in shock and awe. This feeling is the same thing that Marvel had us doing when we watched all of our beloved heroes get dusted in Infinity War. However, here, Mr. DC, I don't feel so good. Can you imagine a story arc where we spend time with all of our heroes, watching them become friends and saviors of this world? Standing above all of them as a shiny pinnacle of light is Superman. A man so innocent and pure that you can't help but love him, feeling as though every fight ends once he walks into the room, bathing you in truth and justice as soon as you hear his music. So how much more tragic would it have been if we had watched him die at that point? Perhaps at the end of a big Justice League movie or massive event leading up to a big bad, such as on the same level of Marvel's Civil War or end of their first Infinity War. Not only would this fit with his character needing to save everyone, but it puts the audience in a much more precarious position, feeling the loss just as our characters feel, leaving us to wonder how our heroes are going to take over whatever looming threat is next if it just killed our boy Wonder. However, we didn't get this. We got a world that had no Superman from the jump, no person that was the best of us or someone to look out for everyone. The only thing we got was a man in a superhero costume until he died. It's a forceful moment that wants us, the audience, to feel pain and to watch the world mourn as a super person hasn't become Superman yet. And unfortunately, we never did get that chance. So, as I said before, this movie is a dumpster fire. filled with lots of moments that don't make sense and storylines that are created to end things instead of building them. We did get a kick-ass intro to Wonder Woman though, and she's pretty cool to see here. So that begs the question. The next film is going to be about her, right? No. So here we go with 2016's Suicide Squad, being point of contention number 2. Before I begin though, I'd also like to include Birds of Prey, Shazam, and Black Adam into this discussion as well. I may not cover some of these films, but they all have the same universal problem to me, and that problem is, why? This movie is strange to say the least, because its placement in the world that it's supposed to inhabit is non-fitting for where the films are heading. Instead of featuring a movie with your other 3 main heroes that, build up your world or expand your story. Now, I don't think this is a bad idea, but it falls under the same problem Superman does. Why do I care? Each villain here has some sort of past with their heroes, many of them being Batman-centric villains, with a few offhanded Flash ones. However, who are you people? Now, I know major audiences love Harley Quinn, and Will Smith did a great job slapping fools around before Chris Rock. However, there's no relationship here. For the continuity's sake, we just went from a story about our big 3 heroes straight to this, and it has no other connection and no greater emphasis on our plot. Now, I could have seen this being redeemed if some of these people were used in the greater overall storyline, but they just weren't. If anything, it seemed more like a cash grab to capitalize on the name Harley Quinn and the Joker more so than it did being a good DCEU film entry. Even the trailers made it seem like the Joker was going to be more prominent in the film, and he just wasn't. Additionally, I can totally see the Guardians of the Galaxy comparisons here. A ragtag group of people tasked with taking down something no one thought they could, only to find commonality between all of them. But yet again, I don't believe them as a team, and I don't know who they are. I think it would have been great to see each of these individuals sprinkled throughout the DCEU films. Seeing Harley Quinn and Deadshot in a Batman-focused movie, or watching Katana and Rick Flag helping out another hero. Not only would this make the culmination of all of them feel great as they come together, seeing each of them continue their storylines after their first appearance is over, but it would build the relationships we as the audience have with these characters, understanding each of their flaws and who they are as people so that we could believe in their eventual growth. It's something James Gunn's The Suicide Squad does real well, but we'll discuss that more on later. Lastly, I don't think I need to discuss the villains of the Joker and Enchantress much. I think we all just get it. None of us want to see Jared Leto cosplay an amateur rapper Joker, and it's said that Enchantress is still wiggling around till this day. I know there are many of you who love this film, but it just doesn't do anything in the grand scope of the story you're trying to build. I'm sorry. Whew. That's a lot, isn't it? As you can see, the DCEU started off rough, and a lot of misguided mistakes with narrative issues out the rear. At this point, there was a lot of potential that just seems unplanned and misguided, more so than it does focused and organized. It's a lot of ideas that could have been utilized real well to reap great potential, but instead fell flat while continuing to try and grow. However, with another cup, in a comfy chair, I'm ready to discuss what's next, and don't worry, we're starting off with a banger. So here we are, finally, the Justice League. And to say that this is the most lackluster, no build, non-exciting movie the DC universe has to offer would be an understatement. This movie should have been a banger, something that set the DC universe on the right path, but instead, we got another dumpster fire of a film. Not only does this movie lack direction, but it lacks excitement, and there's a few reasons for that. The first is the Zack Snyder situation. Remember the director we had that created The Man of Steel and was heading up the overarching story for the DCEU? Yeah, him. Well, unfortunately, due to personal family reasons, he had to step away, something you could look up on your own if you wish to know more about it further. So that begs the question, what do? Well, we're directorless in a movie that was created with Zack Snyder's vision in mind, leaving big shoes to fill for any person that would have taken it. And so enter Joss Whedon. For those that don't know, Joss Whedon is the director of the first two Avengers movies, and also the creator of our beloved Buffy the Vampire Slayer. He was brought onto this film to finish what Zack Snyder started, and oh boy, did this seem exciting. Having the guy who did the first two Avengers should easily transfer and make for a better film, right? Wrong. No, it didn't. After this movie came out, it was discovered that things on set weren't as good as we thought they were, sparking lots of controversy amongst cast members and an airing of dirty laundry on Twitter, or X today. Additionally, we got a lot of backlash from Cyborg star Ray Fisher, stating he and Whedon did not get along. And furthermore, the movie itself was rather lackluster, leading to a confusing narrative and a lack of presence of everyone's favorite Big Blue Boy Scout. But don't worry, we're going to discuss it. So, Superman. Where was he? Not only was he stripped from all the promotional material, but he was barely in this film. Sure, the third act, he makes his grand appearance, but how are you going to take the centerpiece of the Justice League and resort him to being a cameo character? In addition to that, not only have we not spent time with Superman or Clark Kent, but to any person who knows the Justice League, we know Superman is the centerpiece of it, leaving everyone to have many questions before the film, like where is he, and how are you going to make a Justice League movie without him? Furthermore, the movie itself just feels so hollow. Starting the film with an incomplete Justice League and having no time to build out the entire team around them. The only people we really know on this team are Bruce and Diana, having spent the most time with them, and by that I mean one film each. But each of these people are not even the centerpiece of the film. I mean, Batman could be, however, we don't really know who he is, what his values are, or why he wanted to form this team in the first place. Like, my guy, you just learned aliens and gods are real, and he's just chill with it. I guess that really truly is Batman. Furthermore, we don't even know Barry or Arthur or Victor, and now we're just expected to like them and understand who the big bad is. Additionally, who is the big bad? Where does he come from? What's a mother box? To comic fans like myself, I completely understand this. But throughout the 4 films of Build, we've never even seen Darkseid or Steppenwolf. Sure, we got hints with the Omega ending scene, but show me him. Tell me what he wants. On the other end, we've seen Marvel build Thanos and the Infinity Stones up for several films, but so far all we've had is BVS and then nothing, having us accomplish no build for this plot or any stakes for its villain. Speaking of no build, I want to go to the absence of Superman for a second. Remember at the end of BVS when we were meant to care that Superman died? Well, now the same is being asked of us, but in reverse. And once again, what has he done? The lack of relationship and build throughout this universe, if that's what we can call it, is finally rearing its ugly head here and not making us care much about his return or hope we're supposed to feel with his return. Just more happiness that he's actually being seen on screen for once. Like, I know you don't like Batman, but I thought we cleared this up with our mother's names. Was Martha really enough? I don't think she was for Soups or Joe Chill. So yeah, that movie. The penultimate of everything we held near and dear was just a massive dumpster fire. Not only were characters fumbled, but it's just an overall mess that feels hollow. Now, I will say, it is cool to see the Justice League on screen. Just having the image of Superman and Batman standing side by side is just a fantastic visual. However, I think it would have been much sweeter if we really cared or had some sort of emotional depth behind it. And honestly, it's kind of the same for the majority of these films. It's really upsetting and sad to think about, but so many of these films are just as emotionless as the last, maintaining beautiful visuals but lacking so much in feeling. So as we move forward, let's see if that changes anymore with our first real shakeup to the DCEU, the introduction of James Gunn and Peter Safran. As we move forward onto my last point of contention, I want to talk about the 2021 The Suicide Squad and the move to appoint James Gunn and Peter Safran as co-CEOs of DC. I'm going to be taking more of an emphasis on James Gunn, seeing as he is the head of DC Creative and the lead when it comes to the filmmaking process. So, to begin, let's take a look at 2021's The Suicide Squad. To begin, I think this movie is phenomenal. The characters have a lot of heart behind them, in addition to sporting very good action sequences that feel creative and unique, while also spending time with each of these characters to flesh out their relationships, backstories, and overall end goals for each of our members. Furthermore, it lives up to the bloody nature of what the Suicide Squad is supposed to be. I will say, I did have a little bit of the why do I care aspect when this movie first came out, but seeing it was as it was coming at the tail end of the DCEU, I didn't really pay that much attention. If that makes you feel some type of way, I understand, seeing as it sits inconsistently with the point I made about the first Suicide Squad. However, I will say, to at least try and justify myself, this film was also coming out at a time when there was no bigger plans for the DCEU, in addition to the DCEU already having rumblings of a reboot. So, with all that being said, I give it a bit of a pass on those merits. The one thing I did want to talk about, though, was the use of its characters from the first film into this one, in addition to other films moving forward. I don't personally have an issue with this idea, having the characters that were a part of the first film being in this one as well, nor did I have an issue with the Peacemaker series either, being a branch off of that character and the adventures that he is going to be having on his own outside of the Suicide Squad itself. The one thing that I did find troubling, though, is that these films and projects still fall under what's called the Snyderverse, that being every project that followed the Man of Steel, which was started by Zack Snyder way back in 2013. Not only are these characters like Harley Quinn directly tied to the character of Batman, but you also have a Peacemaker who was seen directly speaking to this version of the Justice League and two of its members. So, what's the issue? Well, it's more of an apprehension of the future, I guess, and making sure that it's all okay. You see, back in 2022, James Gunn, the same guy who made this movie and the Guardians movies, was appointed as co-CEO of DC, along with Peter Safran. As I said, though, I want to focus on James Gunn. Not only was James given the role of DC Creative, encapsulating everything in the rumored at the time but now confirmed DCEU reboot, but he also directed this film. So that begs the question, are the characters in this movie that he directed, which falls under his creative direction, going to also be a part of the new rebooted universe? Because if that's the case, then they are still technically connected to the Snyder universe and those characters that exist, which begs the question as to why create a rebooted universe if you're not just going to cut the cord and start over. Again, I have no insider knowledge, nor do I get a creative say in any of these movies. However, I'm a fan, and I'm a fan who just wants to see these films do well, and having a situation like that just seems messy to me on so many fronts. I guess this is more of a point of contention in the making, more so than it is at the moment. And I guess we'll just have to wait and see what the new Superman movie looks like, which looks fantastic, by the way. I do trust James Gunn. His track record is foolproof, and he hasn't made a film to where he's lost my faith. But I just hope the apprehension in this question can be answered as a hopeful light to set the characters back on the right track and give us the rich history that we deserve to have on the big screen. So, as we look toward June of this year and get a glimpse of what James Gunn is cooking with this version of Superman, I hope we can finally take a breather and set our eyes on the stories that we deserve. But with that being said, everyone, thank you for watching. I hope to see you again at the coffee house, and let's take life one refill at a time.